The first time I called Sophie Lane my wife, we were inside the old Marlowe Theater, a condemned building in downtown Richmond that smelled of dust, damp plaster, and faded velvet. Sophie was guiding donors down the aisle, speaking brightly about future school plays, jazz nights, and free workshops, while I followed with a flashlight, watching the crumbling ceiling. When an older man joked, "Your husband looks nervous," Sophie began to correct him, but I smiled. "We've been married for years. She won't wear the ring until I fix the balcony." Everyone laughed. Except Sophie, not really. She touched my sleeve and whispered, "Only if you mean it. Before we step into this story, take a moment to breathe. Maybe you're tired, busy, quiet, or simply looking for something to keep you company. It doesn't matter how you got here. What matters is that you're here now. Thank you for staying. Get comfortable, because we're about to begin." And if you've ever hidden a real feeling inside a joke because the truth felt too dangerous, take a second to like this story, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Would you have asked her what she meant right then? Or would you have been afraid of the answer? I was afraid. That was the honest version. The version I told myself was that Sophie had probably been joking back. We had been friends for 9 years. We had survived bad dates, lost jobs, 1 broken engagement, 2 family funerals, and a Thanksgiving when her oven died with a turkey inside it. We had a language built out of sarcasm and unfinished sentences. She knew I hated olives. I knew she cried at marching bands. She kept a spare key to my house. I kept the emergency contact card for her rescue dog, Winston, in my wallet. Calling us married had been easy, because everyone already treated us like we were. Meaning it was different. Meaning it would require me to admit that the best part of nearly every day was the moment Sophie walked into it. The donor tour ended on stage beneath a work light hanging from a cable. Sophie stood beside a scale model of the renovated theater and answered questions about programming. She was 34, 5'6", with dark hair she usually twisted into a knot when she was concentrating. That afternoon, a pencil was holding it together. Her navy blazer had dust on one shoulder, and there was a thin white line of plaster across her cheek. She looked more at home in that ruined theater than most people looked in finished rooms. The Marlowe was her dream. I was just the man trying to keep it from falling down before she could make it real. My restoration company had taken the project at nearly cost because the non-profit budget was thin and because Sophie had asked me over coffee one rainy morning. She had pushed a folder across the table and said, "You're the only person I trust to tell me whether this building can be saved." I had studied the photographs, then looked at her. Can it? The building or my sanity? Start with the building. I should have known then that I would say yes to almost anything she asked. After the tour, the donors left in a procession of umbrellas. Rain tapped against the boarded windows. I checked the temporary roof supports while Sophie stacked brochures into a cardboard box. "You missed a spot," I said. "Where?" I brushed the plaster from her cheek with my thumb. The movement was ordinary. I had touched her 100 times, guiding her through a crowded room, taking a splinter from her palm, pulling a leaf from her hair. But after what she had whispered, nothing about it felt ordinary. Her eyes lifted to mine. For one suspended second, neither of us moved. Then she stepped back and picked up the box. "You should check the west stairwell," she said, "and you should explain what you said." She kept her attention on the brochures. "I said a lot of things today. You know which one." The old theater settled around us with a low wooden groan. Sophie finally looked at me. "You made a joke? I made one back. That didn't sound like a joke." "Noah, we have a grant deadline on Friday, a fire inspection next week, and water coming through a roof you promised would hold until May." "It is May. That is not comforting." She moved past me, and I let her. That was my first mistake. My second arrived 12 minutes later when a section of the temporary roof membrane tore loose in the wind. Rainwater poured through the back corner of the stage in a silver sheet. I shouted for Sophie to stay clear, but she had already dropped the box and was dragging a tarp toward the costume storage room. For the next hour, there was no room for whispered sentences or imagined meanings. We moved buckets, covered lumber, and called my crew back from 3 different job sites. By the time the leak was controlled, both of us were soaked to the skin. Sophie stood in the aisle, breathing hard, wet hair hanging around her face. "How bad?" she asked. I looked at the ceiling, the stage floor, and the row of original plaster medallions we had removed for preservation. "Bad enough that I'm canceling my weekend. You're supposed to go to your sister's lake house. I'm supposed to keep this place standing." Her expression tightened. "Don't make me the reason you cancel your life again." The word again landed harder than it should have. "I'm not canceling my life. You skipped your birthday trip because of the permit hearing. You missed Thanksgiving dinner because the boiler failed. You've spent 6 months treating every crisis here like it belongs to you. It does belong to me." I signed the contract. That's not what I mean. I knew that. I also knew I didn't want to ask what she did mean, because we were still alone in a dark theater, and the answer might connect too neatly to the whisper I had been trying to dismiss. So I reached for the safer subject. "The opening is in 32 days, I said. "We'll need every hour." Sophie folded her arms, shivering. "The opening can move." "No, the donors would understand." "You wouldn't." She looked away. I took off my jacket and held it out. "Put this on." "I'm already wet." "So am I. That is not how jackets work." "Sophie." She took it. The sleeves hung past her hands, and something about seeing her wrapped in my clothes made the air between us feel smaller. My phone rang. It was my foreman, asking about materials and overtime. I turned away to answer, grateful for the interruption, even while part of me hated it. When I looked back, Sophie was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Then she smiled. But it was the careful smile she used with board members. "Thank you, husband," she said. This time neither of us laughed. By 6 the next morning, my crew had turned the stage into a controlled disaster. Plastic sheeting hung from the flyloft. 2 industrial fans pushed damp air through the auditorium. Marcus Reed, my foreman and oldest employee, stood beneath the leak with a tablet in one hand and a coffee in the other. "You look terrible," he said. "Good morning to you, too. You slept here, didn't you?" I had spent 3 hours on the office couch behind the lobby, using a roll of insulation as a footrest. The roof needed supervision. The roof was not going anywhere. Part of it tried. Marcus glanced toward the lobby, where Sophie was arguing with a rental company about dehumidifiers. "This isn't about the roof." I gave him a look. He raised both hands. "I'm paid to notice structural stress. On buildings, people are cheaper to inspect." Before I could answer, Sophie appeared with 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag. She handed 1 cup to Marcus, 1 to me, then pulled a breakfast sandwich from the bag. "I ordered extra bacon," she said. "You get unpleasant when you're hungry. I'm always pleasant." Marcus made a noise that sounded like a cough and a laugh at the same time. Sophie ignored him. "The rental company can deliver by 10. The grant committee moved our presentation to Monday. And the preservation board wants updated photographs by noon. You've been here since when?" 5:30. "You went home at 1. "So did you." "I did not go home." "I know. Winston was disappointed when you didn't come through the back gate." That was the shape of our lives. Sophie lived 2 streets from me, in a narrow brick house with green shutters. Most evenings, she walked Winston through my yard because my back gate opened onto the alley behind hers. Sometimes she came in for dinner. Sometimes she brought dinner and acted as if I had invited her. Sometimes we sat on my porch until midnight, talking about everything except the things that could change us. Marcus took his coffee and walked away without a word. Sophie watched him go. Why is he smiling? He has a medical condition. She studied me over the rim of her cup. Did you think about what I said yesterday? Yes. The answer came out too quickly. Her fingers tightened around the cardboard sleeve. And I still don't know whether you meant it. She looked toward the stage. Maybe I wanted to know whether you did. The noise of drills and fans seemed to recede. I was joking, I said, because that was the truth I knew how to survive. Sophie nodded once. Then I was too. She set the paper bag on a chair and walked toward the lobby. The disappointment in her face lasted less than a second. It was still long enough for me to see it. I followed her. Sophie. She didn't stop until we reached the old ticket booth. What? She asked. I had no sentence ready. That was unusual for me. I negotiated contracts for a living. I could explain load distribution to a room full of city officials who wanted 3 different answers. But with Sophie standing 3 feet away, I could only feel the weight of all the things I had never said. Her phone lit up in her hand. A name appeared across the screen. Daniel Cho, Chicago Arts Collaborative. She silenced the call. Who's Daniel Cho? I asked. A professional contact. In Chicago? Yes. What does he want? Her eyebrows rose. Are you asking as my contractor or my fake husband? The edge in her voice stopped me. Your friend. She looked at the dark phone screen. He wants me to interview for an executive director position. The answer opened a space inside my chest that felt suddenly cold. In Chicago. You established that. When? 2 weeks from Monday. You applied for a job in Chicago? They approached me. And you didn't tell me. I'm telling you now. Because I saw his name. Because you asked. That's not the same thing. Sophie exhaled slowly. The Marlowe board still hasn't decided whether my role continues after opening. My contract ends in July. Chicago is offering a 3-year appointment, a real programming budget, and authority to build something instead of begging for permission every month. You're building something here. I'm trying to. So stay and finish it. Her expression changed. Not anger exactly, but hurt finding armor. You make that sound very simple. It is simple. No, Noah. It is simple for you because you own your company. You decide which jobs matter. You decide when to take less money. You decide when to cancel a weekend and call it responsibility. I have 7 board members who praise my vision and then ask whether they should hire someone with more leadership experience. You have more leadership experience than anyone they'll find. I know. The quiet certainty of that answer made me ashamed of how quickly I had treated her decision as something she needed me to solve. She continued. Chicago sees it too. I leaned against the ticket counter. Behind the cloudy glass, faded paper stubs still sat in a rusted tray. Do you want to go? I want the interview. That isn't what I asked. It's what I can answer today. I wanted to tell her not to go. The words rose with surprising force, but asking her to stay would create another question. Stay for what? For a theater whose board might replace her? For a city she already knew? For a man who had just told her his idea of marriage was only a joke? I looked at the floor. Sophie gave a small, humorless laugh. That's what I thought. She turned away. I caught her hand before she could leave. Her palm was warm against mine. She looked down at our joined hands, then up at me. I don't want you to go, I said. The truth left me exposed, but it was incomplete, and we both knew it. "Why?" she asked. "Because my house would become only a house, because nobody else knew I kept the good coffee in a cabinet above the refrigerator, because every future I had ever pictured without trying had somehow included her." Instead, I said, "The Marlowe needs you." Sophie pulled her hand free. "That building," she said softly, "is not the only thing that gets to need me." She walked away before I could find a better answer. For the rest of the morning, I worked with the concentration of a man trying to outrun his own stupidity. We replaced damaged decking, traced the water path, and discovered that an old roof drain had cracked behind a parapet wall. It was repairable. Everything in buildings usually was, if you could find the failure and reach it before the damage spread. People were more difficult. By lunch, Marcus had heard enough from the crew to know Sophie was interviewing in Chicago. Construction sites were terrible places for secrets. He found me measuring a section of warped stage floor. "You going to let her leave?" he asked. "She's interviewing. She hasn't accepted anything." That wasn't my question. "I'm not in charge of her." Also not my question. I snapped the tape measure closed. "What exactly would you like me to do?" "Start by admitting this project stopped being just a project about 6 months ago." "To whom?" "To yourself would be efficient." I looked across the theater. Sophie stood near the lobby doors with her laptop open, speaking to a donor. Even from a distance, I knew the moment she was nervous because she pressed her thumb into the center of her palm. She did it then. I had seen that gesture for years. I had never told her I noticed. "She was engaged once," I said. Marcus waited. 3 years ago. His name was Andrew, financial consultant, good suits, very white teeth. "I remember. You hated him." "I did not hate him. You referred to him as a human spreadsheet. He made her schedule dinner through his assistant." "Why did they break up?" "He was offered a promotion in Dallas and assumed she would go. He had already contacted a realtor before he told her." Marcus glanced toward Sophie. "So don't make her stay. I wasn't planning to. Give her a reason to choose staying." Different thing. I returned to the warped boards. "You make relationships sound like a renovation proposal." "No. Renovations are easier. At least buildings don't pretend they're joking." That afternoon, Sophie and I drove across town to meet the preservation architect. Usually she sat beside me and changed the radio station without asking. This time she rode with her hands folded around her phone, looking through the passenger window. At a red light, I said, "I'm sorry." "For what part?" "For making your interview about me. For acting like the job here is guaranteed. For saying the theater needs you when I should have said—" The light changed. A horn sounded behind me. I drove through the intersection. "You should have said what?" she asked. I could feel her watching me. "That you deserve the offer." Her gaze returned to the window. "Thank you," she said. It was the right thing to say. It was also not enough. The next 10 days became a blur of sawdust, phone calls, and small moments that felt too important. Sophie brought dinner to the theater every night. I told myself it was because we were working late. She told herself the same thing. We ate on the edge of the stage while my crew packed up around us, passing a carton of noodles back and forth because somebody had forgotten forks. We argued about paint colors, donor plaques, and whether the lobby needed a piano. She won the piano. I won the paint. Neither of us mentioned Chicago. On Thursday, I found her alone in the balcony after midnight. The repaired roof held above us. Most of the seats had been removed, leaving stepped rows of bare concrete and metal brackets. Sophie sat in the center with her shoes beside her, looking down at the stage. "You're going to get tetanus," I said. "I'm wearing socks." "That is not how tetanus works." She shifted to make room for me. I sat beside her. From up there, the theater looked enormous and fragile. Work lights threw long shadows over the walls. The restored proscenium arch glowed softly beneath its protective covering. Sophie held out a paper cup. Tea. You brought me tea? I brought me tea. You can have some. I drank from it anyway. Honey, lemon, too sweet. She rested her head against the wall. Do you remember the first building you showed me? The courthouse annex? The abandoned train depot. That was not abandoned. It was underutilized. There were pigeons living in the ticket office. They were temporary tenants. She smiled. You talked about that building for an hour. You ran your hand over a cracked brick like it had a pulse. I was 29 and dramatic. You're 38 and dramatic. I'm more expensive now. Her smile faded into something gentler. That was the day I realized you loved broken things. The sentence struck close enough that I turned toward her. I love things that can still be saved, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. That's not always the same thing. The air shifted again, carrying us toward the conversation we had avoided. Sophie, I said, why did you say it? She didn't pretend not to understand this time. Her eyes moved to the stage below. Because, for 1 second, I wanted to hear what it sounded like. What sounded like? Being chosen by you. My breath caught. She continued before I could speak. I know that's unfair. You were joking. You've never promised me anything. But people have called us a couple for years, and we always laugh. We laugh because it's easier than explaining whatever this is. She gestured between us. What is this? I asked. That's the problem. I don't know. I looked down at my hands. There was dried paint near my thumb and a shallow cut across one knuckle. I didn't know you wanted me to choose you. You never asked. You were engaged. 3 years ago. And after Andrew, you said you were done letting men decide the shape of your life. I am. That sounded like you didn't want. It meant I didn't want a man who expected me to disappear into his plans. It did not mean I stopped wanting to be loved. The clarity of her words made every assumption I had used as shelter feel weak. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. She gave me a look that held more sadness than anger. Because you told me, over and over. I never said I didn't want you. No, you said marriage was a contract people signed when they were afraid to be alone. You said your father proved promises were mostly theater. You joked that the secret to a good relationship was keeping separate houses and never asking questions. I say stupid things. You say safe things. I leaned back against the cold wall. My father had left when I was 15. He packed on a Tuesday and told my mother he had spent years trying to become the man she thought he was. Then he moved to Arizona with a woman from his office. My mother waited for him to change his mind until waiting became her personality. I had promised myself I would never do that to anyone. Somewhere along the way, I had decided the surest way not to break a promise was never to make one. Sophie had been standing beside me for 9 years, and I had called my fear honesty. I'm not my father, I said. I know. Then why do you look at me like you're waiting for me to leave? I don't. Her voice softened. I look at you like I've been waiting for you to arrive. The sentence took the air out of me. The air. I turned toward her. She was close enough that I could see the small scar beside her eyebrow, the one she got falling from a bicycle at 12. Her lips parted slightly. My hand moved before I had decided what to do, touching the side of her face. She leaned into my palm. Then a drill clattered somewhere below us. We both startled. Marcus called up from the orchestra level. Sorry. Did not know anybody was still here. Sophie stood too quickly and reached for her shoes. I stood with her. Don't go. I'm tired. That isn't what I meant. I know. She slipped on one shoe, then the other. But I can't be the person who tells you how to feel, Noah. And I can't stay in a half-finished room forever just because I can imagine what it might become. She walked down the balcony steps. I followed her to the lobby but stopped when she turned. My interview is in 11 days, she said. I'm going. I know. And if I get the offer, I will consider it seriously. I know. What happens next has to be because you know what you want, not because a deadline scared you. Then she left. The lobby doors closed behind her with a hollow sound. For the first time since we began restoring the Marlowe, I understood that finishing the building would not keep her in my life. The next morning, I called my sister Rachel. She answered on the 4th ring. Is someone dead? No. Are you injured? No. Then why are you calling before 7? I need advice. There was a pause. I'm sitting down. Rachel was 3 years younger than me and had been married for 12 years. She had also spent most of our childhood telling me when I was being an idiot. I explained the joke, the whisper, the interview, and the balcony conversation. She did not interrupt, which was worse than interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You love her. I care about her." Noah. I'm trying to be precise. You're hiding in vocabulary. I rubbed my forehead. What if I tell her, and then I fail? At what? At being what she thinks I am. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Do you know what Ben promised me when we got married? That he'd love you forever? No. He promised that when he was scared, he would not make me guess whether he was still in the room. That's the promise we've used most. I looked through the office window at the theater. Morning light found the dust in the air. Rachel continued. You think commitment means guaranteeing nothing will hurt? It doesn't. It means telling the truth before fear gets to speak for you. I don't want to ask Sophie to give up Chicago. Then don't. What if she goes? Then love her honestly while she decides. That is still better than losing her dishonestly. After we hung up, I sat alone in the office for a long time. Then I opened the project schedule, canceled nothing, and started making a different kind of plan. The plan began badly. That afternoon, I asked Sophie to meet me in the theater office. I had printed a proposal that would transfer part of my company's remaining fee into a permanent maintenance reserve for the Marlowe. I had also drafted a letter to the board recommending Sophie as executive director and offering my firm's support for a 5-year capital plan. It was practical, responsible, measurable. It was also exactly the wrong thing. Sophie read the first page, then the second. Her face became still. What is this? She asked. A way to stabilize the theater after opening. The reserve covers emergency repairs. The capital plan gives the board a reason to keep leadership consistent. Leadership meaning me. Yes. You talked to the board? I sent Rachel a draft to review. I haven't submitted it. Sophie placed the papers on the desk with careful hands. So your answer to our conversation is a maintenance fund? No. This is part of it. What is the other part? I had practiced the words all morning. With her standing in front of me, they scattered. I want you here, I said. For the building, for more than the building. How much more? The directness of the question exposed every weak beam in me. I'm trying to show you. You're trying to solve me. That's not fair. No? She touched the proposal. You heard me say I wanted to be chosen, and you brought me a business plan. I brought you proof that I'm willing to build something long-term, with money and contracts, things you understand. Yes, because I'm trying not to make promises I can't support. Her eyes shone, but her voice stayed steady. I never asked you to promise me a life you hadn't chosen. I asked whether you meant the joke. I did. Then why can't you say what that means? Because I don't know how to do this perfectly. I'm not asking for perfect. What are you asking for? The truth without scaffolding. The office seemed too small. I could hear hammers striking in the auditorium, each blow sharp and regular. I stepped closer. The truth is that the thought of you leaving makes me feel like I missed the moment when my life became ours. Her expression broke for a second. I continued, forcing myself not to retreat. The truth is that I look for you in every room. I buy your coffee when you're not there. I haven't gone on a second date in 2 years because everyone feels like an interruption to a conversation I'm already having with you. Sophie's breath caught. The truth, I said, is that I love you. The words were quieter than I expected. They did not cause the ceiling to fall. They did not turn me into my father. They simply stood between us, true and overdue. Sophie closed her eyes. When she opened them, there were tears in them. I love you too, she said. Relief hit me so fast I almost laughed. I reached for her, but she stepped back. But that doesn't answer everything. My hand fell. She pressed her lips together, gathering herself. I have spent years accepting pieces of you because I was afraid asking for more would cost me all of you. I can't begin a relationship under the same terms. I'm not offering pieces. You told me you loved me because I might leave. I told you because you made me stop lying. And if Chicago had never called? I had no honest answer that would not hurt her. She nodded as if my silence confirmed something. I need to know you're choosing me, she said, not reacting to the possibility of losing me. I am choosing you, then choose with time. Not panic. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen, then answered. Hello, Daniel. I stood 3 feet away while she listened. Yes, she said. Monday at 10 works, she ended the call. They moved the interview up, she said. I leave Sunday. That's in 3 days. I know, I wanted to argue. Instead, I picked up the proposal and tore it in half. Sophie stared at me. You were right, I said. That was scaffolding. I tore it again and dropped the pieces into the recycling bin. The maintenance reserve is still a good idea, she said despite herself. It is. I'll rewrite it after you decide what you want, and it won't mention your job. A small smile touched her mouth, then disappeared. What happens now? She asked. Now I finish the theater. You go to your interview. And I stop making you guess. For the next 3 days, I did exactly that. I did not follow Sophie from room to room with declarations. I did not ask her to cancel Chicago. I told her what I felt in small, unprotected ways. When she arrived with coffee, I said, seeing you is the best part of my morning. When she solved a dispute between the lighting designer and the electrician, I said, you are the reason this place works. When we ate dinner on the stage, I said, I wish I had noticed sooner that this was what happiness looked like. She never gave me an answer. But she stopped stepping away. On Saturday night, we tested the restored marquee. One by one, the letters of Marlowe lit the sidewalk in warm white light. Sophie stood beside me with her hands in her coat pockets. It's beautiful, she said. You made it happen. We made it happen. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they sounded like goodbye. She left for Chicago the next morning. I drove her to the airport because she asked me to. Winston sat in the back seat with his head between us, panting as if nothing important was happening. At the departure curb, I lifted her suitcase from the trunk. Sophie wrapped her arms around Winston, then turned to me. I don't know what I'm going to decide, she said. I know. I don't want you to think the interview means I don't love you. I don't. And I don't want love to become a reason either of us resents the other. It won't. She searched my face. How can you be sure? Because if you choose Chicago, I will be hurt. I will not call your dream a betrayal. Her eyes filled. I touched her cheek. And if you choose Richmond, I will spend every day making sure you know I wanted you, not just your staying. She leaned forward and kissed me. It was not a dramatic kiss. There was no music, no rain, no audience beyond a traffic officer waving cars forward. It was soft, brief, and real enough to rearrange every memory that came before it. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. That was not a decision, she whispered. I know, it was not a promise. I know, it was just something true. That's enough for today. She walked into the terminal without looking back. For the first time in my life, I let someone I loved leave without pretending I did not care, and without trying to control whether she returned. It was the hardest, honest thing I had ever done. While Sophie was gone, the Marlowe tried to test every promise I had made. A shipment of aisle lights arrived with the wrong fittings. The fire marshal found a problem with an exit door. One of the restored lobby mirrors cracked when a mounting bracket failed. I worked through Sunday night and most of Monday, but I did not use the chaos as an excuse to send Sophie updates she had not requested. At 10 Monday morning, I looked at my phone and imagined her walking into the interview. At 11:30, she texted, "It went well. I need time to think." I replied, "I'm proud of you." Then I put the phone away and repaired the exit door. She returned Tuesday evening, 4 days before opening. I was on a ladder hanging the final brass number above the balcony entrance when I heard her voice below me. "That's crooked." I nearly dropped the drill. Sophie stood in the aisle wearing the same gray coat she had worn to the airport. Her suitcase was beside her. She looked tired, uncertain, and more beautiful than anything I had ever restored. I climbed down. "How was Chicago?" I asked. "Cold. The job?" "Good. Important." They offered it. The theater seemed to hold its breath with me. "When do they need an answer?" "Tomorrow." I nodded. "Do you want to walk through the building?" She looked surprised, then smiled faintly. Yes. We moved through every room together. I showed her the repaired exit, the new aisle lights, and the mirror we had replaced. She showed me changes to the volunteer schedule and a box of programs she had corrected from her hotel room. Neither of us spoke about the offer until we reached the balcony. The seats had been installed while she was away. We sat in the center, in almost the same place where she had told me she wanted to be chosen. "I met the Marlowe board this afternoon," she said. My stomach tightened. "I didn't know they were meeting. I asked them to." She folded her hands in her lap. "I told them I had another offer. I also told them I would stay only if they gave the executive director real authority over programming and community partnerships. Not a temporary title, not another 6-month contract. What did they say? They argued for 40 minutes. That sounds like them. Then they agreed. Pride rose through me before hope could. "You did that." "I did. Are you staying?" She looked toward the stage. "I turned down Chicago an hour ago. I let out a breath I had been holding for 2 days. Sophie turned to me. "I did not turn it down for you." "I know. I turned it down because this is the work I want, under terms I chose. I know. And now I need to decide whether I trust what's happening between us." I faced her fully. "Then let me make that part clear." My hands shook slightly. I did not hide them. When I joked that we were married, I meant more than I understood. I meant that you are already woven into the life I value most. But marriage is not a word I want to use as camouflage anymore. Her eyes stayed on mine. "I love you," I said. "I want to be with you openly. I want ordinary Tuesdays and difficult years. I want separate opinions, shared decisions, your dog on my furniture, and your coffee cups in every room. I want to learn how to make promises without pretending I can control the future." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I am not asking you to marry me tonight," I continued. "You were right. Fear should not set the schedule. I am asking you to choose a real relationship with me, starting now. And I am telling you that if, after we have built that life honestly, you still want marriage, I will not hide behind a joke." Sophie reached for my hand. "That," she said, "is the first thing you've said that sounds like you mean all of it." "I do." She leaned closer. "Then yes?" "Yes to what?" "To us, Noah." Her smile trembled. "Don't ruin the moment by making me itemize it." I laughed, and she kissed me again beneath the finished ceiling. Opening night filled every seat. Children from the neighborhood performed the first song on stage. A local jazz trio played from the orchestra pit. Donors admired the gold leaf, the restored murals, and the polished lobby floors. But Sophie watched the children. She stood in the wings with a headset around her neck, giving cues and calming nervous parents. I watched her do the work she had fought to claim. During her opening remarks, she thanked the board, the volunteers, my crew, and the city. Then she looked toward me. "And thank you to Noah Mercer," she said, "who believes old places deserve more than preservation. He believes they deserve a future." Only I knew she was talking about more than the theater. 10 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I asked Sophie to meet me in the balcony. There were no donors, no board members, and no crowd. Winston sat in the aisle wearing a bow tie he clearly hated. Sunlight came through the restored windows and fell across the seats. I stood beside the brass number I had hung crooked the first time. "I have a question," I said. Sophie looked at Winston, then at the small box in my hand. "This seems suspiciously organized. I made a checklist. Of course you did." I opened the box. Her hand rose to her mouth. "I meant it then," I said. "I understand it now. Sophie Lane, will you marry me?" She cried before she answered, which terrified me for approximately 3 seconds. Then she knelt in front of me, took my face in both hands, and whispered, "Only because you mean it." "I do." That sounded like practice. It was. She laughed and said yes. We were married at the Marlowe the following spring. Rachel stood beside Sophie. Marcus stood beside me and claimed credit for the entire relationship. The board complained about flower placement. Winston slept through the vows. When the officiant asked whether I took Sophie as my wife, I looked at the woman who had taught me that love was not proven by never being afraid. It was proven by telling the truth while you were. "I do," I said. This time nobody laughed. And if this story reminded you of someone who hides sincerity behind humor, leave a comment about the promise you would need to hear, and the promise you would be willing to make. Sometimes the bravest words are not grand. Sometimes they are simply the truth, finally spoken without a joke around them. Joke.